Hi, I'm Joe.
I'm Allison.
And this is Queer Cinema Catchup.
The show where we catch up with one another.
And queer movies, TV.
And miscellaneous topics.
And the story behind us is Allison and I were neighbors growing up.
Many moons ago.
Neither of us knew the other was queer. And then Allison moved away to Pennsylvania.
So sad.
Lived out her high school and college years on the East Coast. And then eventually wound up in LA as my roommate.
Crazy.
And now we've started this podcast together talking about queer topics. And today we will be talking about the movie I Saw the TV Glow.
Which was a movie.
And we literally saw it 2 hours ago.
At the Grove, an LA staple.
So I was like trying to see what movies were coming out this weekend.
And
this popped up on AMC. So I was like, do you want to go? And Alice was like, yes.
And I purposely looked up nothing.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about it either. I just knew the star of the movie, which I forget his name.
Let's look it up. Justice Smith.
Yeah.
And then Bridget Lundy Payne.
Are they the one from Atypical?
Yeah.
And I think they're non-binary.
Yeah, I think so.
What's the writer-director's name?
Jane Schoenbrun, who's also non-binary. And it was produced by Emma Stone and her husband, Dave McCary. I'm really bad at pronouncing things. I should just throw that out there for the listeners.
As someone who always wants to be right, it must be hard for you to be so wrong.
You're so right.
I always am.
That's my line.
So Allison and I went to the 1 o'clock showing today at the Grove. And beforehand, I actually got my hair cut yesterday. And my barber was talking about Cali seed bagels, which made me think of Bagel Broker. So I told Allison before the movie we have to go to Bagel Broker. And we did. And it was delicious.
It was pretty good. But you just can't get a New York bagel in California. I'm sorry.
What made it not a New York bagel?
There's something about, this is going to sound a little crazy, but I feel like, yeah, about the water and how it's regulated here.
Allison's like, I like a little spit in my water.
Ew.
Before the movie, we saw some trailers.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that first. You have talked about you're kind of becoming more anti-trailer.
I'm anti-trailer, not because I don't like them, but I just feel like they give away so much. And then we go to so many movies nowadays also. It gets really repetitive.
I have to say that I still love trailers. I think if I had the editing skills, I would want to make trailers.
Have you ever seen The Holiday with Cameron Diaz?
No, I didn't even know that movie existed until I was on a plane and someone was watching it in front of me.
Well, I bring it up because in that movie, Cameron Diaz is an LA trailer editor.
That's so cool. If I could do it, I would.
So some of the trailers that played were Cuckoo, starring the person from Euphoria.
Hunter Schafer. And Dan Stevens from Downton Abbey, which he was really kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a movie where Hunter Schafer is in a small mountain town and gets asked to work at like a lodge, kind of like The Shining, I guess. It kind of had Shining vibes.
And then next up, our favorite, Daddy-O.
Okay. Daddy-O stars Dakota Johnson and Sean Penn. Amazing actors.
Yes.
Sean Penn drives a cab and Dakota Johnson gets in the cab and they just, they bond about life. It kind of seemed like a Life is Beautiful if only you look around kind of a movie. Yeah. And then his name is Daddy-O, Sean Penn, and that's the name of the movie. And it just looks really dumb. And I really hope there's some kind of twist to it because it just looks so earnest. And I love earnest things, but there's just something about it where it's very cringy.
How can that carry like a whole feature-length movie?
But there has to be like a twist to it.
But that's so misleading then for the trailer that you get. My favorite, Sean Penn mentions that his wife passed. And then Dakota Johnson says, like, do you miss her? And it's like, of course he misses his dead wife. What?
Well, you don't know. Maybe they had a difficult life, a difficult relationship. Maybe he wanted her dead. And then the last trailer we saw, Speak No Evil.
Kind of a boring title. And then, of course, Maxine.
Oh.
I'm excited about that.
Well, that was funny because I leaned over to Joe. I was like, we got to put this one on the list. And Joe was like, it's already on there.
It's already on the spreadsheet. Should we just launch into talking about I Saw the TV Glow?
Yeah. Did you like it? Did you not like it?
I would say overall, I liked it, but it's a movie that I would never really recommend to people and I wouldn't ever really rewatch again.
I think I liked it more than you did possibly. I don't know if I could watch it again because it really scared me. Mm-hmm. I think I would recommend it to people. I feel like it was a little thought-provoking. I don't know, but maybe we should give a quick summary as well before we...
Yeah, what's the character's name?
I think it was Owen and Maddie. Is that right? I'm pretty sure I'm right. And you know how I love being right.
Yeah, Owen and Maddie.
Okay, so...
However, in the second half of the film, Maddie kept saying, that's not my name anymore. That's not my name anymore. It's like, well, what the fuck is your name then?
I know what her name was.
What, Isabel?
Yeah, well, no. The other one.
Who's the other one?
There were two.
I know, but what's their name?
I don't know.
Oh.
I only remember...
So there's some things you don't know.
That's true.
Tara.
Tara. Okay, so it's an unspecified time period, unspecified suburban city. This young boy, Owen's like an isolated little kid. He seems to connect well with his mom, but he has a dad who's like, they never really say what's going on with their dynamic, but the dad just exudes frightening energy, and it's very clear that Owen is afraid of him. And that was very effective for me. And
would you say Owen is afraid?
Yes.
We'll get to that later.
We'll get to that later. So yes, Owen, he's an isolated kid, can't really express himself very well. And he's really interested in this TV show that he's not allowed to watch because it's on too late, called The Pink Opaque.
And the year that this show starts is in
90s.
1996, which is really important.
Unspecified. He is at voting night at his school, which
I saw Ross Perot on the list. So that would have been during the time Bill Clinton was running for president.
I saw Bill Clinton's name.
What was really interesting about the voting booth is there's a whole wall of buttons you can press on who you want to vote for, which I've never seen before.
It was kind of an odd detail. I actually was wondering during that part, like, is this not reality? Because one, you can't bring another person into the booth with you when you vote.
I didn't really know what they were doing, though. I don't know if the mom was just showing Owen.
And she said something, I couldn't understand what she was saying.
You need to be an adult now. Like, she was like, don't be afraid of adult things or something like that. It was, I don't know.
I feel like that might be a key to understanding the entire movie, because I remember I was very like unmoored by that. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Also, the high school was called Void High School.
I saw that.
Which is also strange.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he like goes outside and there's this teen girl reading a book about the Pink Opaque. It's like an episode guide, and he's like wants to talk to her, and they connect. And long story short,
they're actually in the hallway, and I remember it because they're sitting by vending machines.
Yeah, and the one was
cool. The most Fruitopia.
I wanted it.
Coolest 90s looking ad.
I wanted it
It was
so
really striking.
badly.
And Maddie, the actor, is from, we both recognize from Atypical.
I didn't recognize, I really literally did not recognize them.
Bridget
And
Lundy Payne.
They look like Anne Hathaway.
Oh, wow. Specifically during Les Mis.
Yeah, because there's a part where their hair throughout was like really cool. Yeah. Like it jumps through time, and each time period their hair was different. And
yeah, you're really good at like quoting lines, and you're
thank you
really good at remembering like people's ages or where they are. But I feel like in this movie, just because the pace of it, it was
easy to follow.
To a degree, I kind of appreciated it. Towards the end of the movie, I was kind of like, all right, let's pick this up. But at the time, Owen is in 7th grade and Maddie's in 9th grade.
Correct.
And so there's kind of like a divide between them. 9th grade, I don't know how really Void High School works. I don't know why they'd be in the same school together. Was he just there because it was like they were there to vote, and then eventually they'd be in the same school? But there was this really interesting thing is when they're both interacting, I actually don't really remember what much the conversation is, aside from them like talking about the Pink Opaque. And what I got that scene is Maddie invites Owen to come over and to watch it, because Owen has a really strict dad who doesn't let him stay up past 10:15, and the Pink Opaque plays at 10:30.
But what's interesting is that she says to, and I'll say she because I think the character's gender identity was female, but the actor is non-binary, we believe. Okay. Mm-hmm. What's really interesting about that scene is that Maddie says to Owen, like, you know what you should do? And kind of smiles at him in like this mischievous way. And basically you don't see her tell him to do this, but he tells his mom, like, I'm going to go sleep over at this kid's house. And mom's like, oh, you're still friends? Highlighting his isolation. Which was a great, I think one of my biggest problems with this movie is they tell a lot instead of showing. And I feel like that was a great moment of like subtext of like, okay, like he has difficulty maintaining friendships. Yeah, I agree. He has his mom ask his dad, which is, again, good subtext of he's so afraid of his dad, he can't even talk to him. Yeah. But then, the mom drops him off and he kind of like acts embarrassed till she drives away. And then he like runs to this girl's house with her friends there, and they watch the Pink Opaque. Well, Owen comes into the house and the two girls are chatting, and they hear the sliding glass door open where Owen enters, and Maddie turns and looks at him and then immediately looks back and starts talking to the front. It was really being very like, yeah, it was not very nice. Owen, and then Owen says something like, be quiet, the Pink Opaque is starting. And then so Owen's just kind of like awkwardly sitting on the side. So it's like you think that he's finally found a friend, but then you're questioning, you're kind of on guard, like what's going on here? Yeah, what's going on here? And the like sequence of the show is very funny. Like people were laughing because something really important happens though during this that I think is a reveal that's a setup during the first episode that we see of the Pink Opaque. The ice cream? What? Yeah. The movie itself, I saw the TV glow. It's like the typical, I forget, it's not scope, but it's like 16:9 or whatever. But the TV show is shown in like SD square television. What is he talking about? Like the... No, I'm just kidding. Like an old TV. Like, yeah. And they even make the show look, kind of has like that video grain. Yeah. Which I love that look because it reminds me of all of our home videos that we used to make. Yes. And it starts out with these two characters sitting on the sidewalk, and they both have these popsicles. And one of them's griping, oh man,
I wish the summer didn't have to end and this was our last popsicle. Why can't the ice cream man come outside of the summer? And then that part was kind of like poor acting, poor quality. And
but it's supposed to
intentionally,
evoke...
And you're laughing. And it reminds
like
me of
90s
TV shows. Like 90s TV shows.
And so people were laughing in the audience out of recognition, I feel like.
And then it cuts to a child in their bedroom. And it's still in like the SD square format. But the production value looks a little better than what we just saw on the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. And then it cuts to what they're looking at.
And they're scared. They seem
it's
scared.
This really scary
ice cream man.
Ice cream man had like his face is melting and he's holding up ice cream or something like
the
that.
Popsicles, I think.
Popsicles.
It was freaky.
And you're kind of like, oh, this is still in the TV show. And then it cuts to Owen watching the TV show and it's back to like the widescreen movie format. And then it cuts to what I perceive is supposed to be him still watching the TV. Mm-hmm. But this time it's an ice cream truck on fire, but it's not in the TV format. It's in like the widescreen format.
Yeah.
As if to imply that this is happening in reality.
Yeah.
Is that what you interpreted when you saw it?
I feel like you were bringing your editing,
the technical
film knowledge to it in a way. Like I wasn't, obviously, like when you say that, and like, yes, I was aware of it on like a very subconscious level, but I wasn't really thinking about it. You know, okay. It was just kind of like the way it like moved. It made me feel like, ooh, this is kind of creepy, but also kind of silly, and in a way that I liked. Like I kind of liked that. The
uncertainty,
the juxtaposition.
Yeah. And so
but it did fill me with a kind of dread, which I'll talk about in the next beat of the scene. But go ahead, you should finish your thought.
So I definitely, that moment I was like, oh, it's probably going to be where like the pink opaque leaks into reality and we'll be questioning
I didn't
like
think that.
What's real and what's not real.
I did not think that, to be honest. The part about that scene that stood out to me was after that, the other girl leaves. And then he's like, I told my mom this was a sleepover. Like, and he doesn't really ask to sleep over, but he's already like set up his little sleeping bag. And then she's like, yeah, you can stay here, but you have to be out by dawn because you don't want my stepdad to like see you down here. And she had some reason why, but it sounded scary.
Get angry or something or mad.
And it was like, ooh. And then she like starts to go up the stairs and they focus on him. And you just hear like noises on the stairs. And I was just like filled with dread. I was like, what's going to happen here?
I thought it was your chair leaning back because I heard a creak, but it's actually Maddie turning around back on the staircase and sitting down in moments that gets repeated that I really love.
Yeah. And though I think what was interesting about this scene is she says like, do you ever feel like the pink opaque is like more real than real life? And she says it with like a very sad face, longing face on. And he doesn't, I don't think he answers.
So it's really odd too. He's lying on the floor because he thinks Maddie's left. Mm-hmm. And then it's like Maddie, so he's like facing a wall, not looking in Maddie's direction, but Maddie kind of turns around on the staircase. And so it's a point where they're talking to each other, but neither of them are looking at the other person.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of important. It's an opportunity for Maddie to be really just like open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Kind of like, in a way, watching these episodes of The Pink Opaque makes her almost reflect on her own life. And she reveals these really deep secrets that she has and concerns and anxieties.
Yeah. And I think it's very clear from like, it becomes more explicitly queer shortly thereafter. But I think in that moment, I kind of saw where that was going because she was talking about the pink opaque and being like, oh, these two girls, like basically the voiceover explaining what the show was about was so funny. It was like, once I had an imaginary friend and then we were separated across the county, but we were still psychically connected.
I wish I remember what it was though, but it was like, I had an imaginary friend and I was hers, which doesn't make any sense. It's like, what do you mean? You both were each other's imaginary friend.
It was so funny. And like the idea that they had this like female intimacy, but also like a distance, it just feels very queer. Like, I was like, oh, she's probably gay. Like, this makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I had an affinity for the Pink Opaque because it just looked like those like late 90s TV shows that I used to watch on like Nickelodeon or Disney Channel, like so weird.
Yes.
And I like too, it's kind of like Buffy in a way where it's like there's a new monster of the week.
Yes.
But then there's also an overarching
big bad
in this show is Mr. Melancholy.
Which is the moon.
It's the moon. And so we're watching in this first episode we see, it's kind of like, I don't remember if Maddie like says like, and then she kind of like explains the premise before we see it.
I think so.
And then we see Mr. Melancholy and it's just like this really cheesy effect of this like moon in the sky making like all these like silly
evil faces,
but they're really
kind of like
overdone.
The Man in the Moon, the famous film.
Yes, with the bottle gets thrown in his eye.
Like that. And then also they meet at summer camp. So the whole imaginary friend thing, it is kind of interesting because it didn't seem like they actually were imaginary friends, but they were sitting on a dock and they met at summer camp. And the one girl's like experiencing, she's like, and Mr. Melancholy's out there, he's going to get us. And his evil henchmen, Marco and Polo, which I didn't even register. You were like, Marco Polo. I was like, oh. But they had like a really creepy,
they're also kind of like shaped like half moons, but they had like a they had, like,
ponytail.
a hair on the top that was like gelled in a curve, and they both had goatees that gelled in a curve to like create this crescent moon shape.
Yeah, it was really creepy.
It's really silly, but like oddly creepy too.
And also played with gender, I think, which is important because they kind of read as neither masculine or feminine or both.
Yes.
But yeah, and then they're like on the dock and the girls are like, I don't know what's going on. Like, am I going crazy? What's wrong with me? And then the other girl says, and they're named Tara and
Isabel.
Isabel goes, you're not crazy. You're like me. Which is interesting because later on in the movie, that's not what happens for Maddie when she returns. Well, we won't say too much yet, but she basically comes with a kind of a crazy story and is looking for someone to say, I believe you. And that's not what happens, which reminded me of The Leftovers.
Oh, interesting.
I thought that's where it was going to go.
Making you question.
No, like the end of The Leftovers, it ends with one character, Carrie Coon, telling another character who she's not seen in like years, who basically disappeared. She tells him this crazy story of where she's been. I mean, this is kind of a spoiler. The other person, you expect them to be like, this is ridiculous. Where have you been? I don't believe you. You left me. But he goes, I believe you. And I found it to be like the most romantic, moving thing ever.
Owen says they believe Maddie.
But he doesn't.
Oh, so how does that connect to The Leftovers?
Well, I thought it was going to go there. That he was going to be like, I believe you.
Okay.
And it would have been, but anyway, it's not happened.
And also, Owen, that actor's a person of color, and Maddie is white. Mm-hmm. And then in the TV show, Isabel's a person of color, and Tara is white.
Yeah.
I think this
I agree.
Intentional connection.
It's absolutely intentional. And okay, I guess we should just say later on in the movie, so Maddie disappears at some point in time. Mm-hmm. And later on in the movie, she returns like after a decade. And he's like, where were you? Like everyone thought you were dead.
He said, specifically, where have you been the last decade?
I think he was supposed to like highlight the ridiculous, because it didn't look like a decade had gone by. You know what I mean? They looked exactly the same.
Well, so, I mean, we've been them since 1996, then 2 years pass, and then 8 years pass. So now we're at the 8-year jump. So like technically it's been like 8 years since they've seen each other.
Yeah. But just to quickly fill people in.
It's a big turn in the movie, but continue.
Yeah, and then we'll go back to kind of scene by scene. But like just so she returns and claims that in leaving her family, and we'll explain why in a little bit, she realized that her life wasn't real and she actually was Isabel, the character who has been sent to this fake plane of reality, the Midnight Realm.
I missed that.
Midnight Realm, where
it's the pink opaque.
No, but Mr. Melancholia was trying to send the pink opaque to the Midnight Realm.
Melancholy.
What?
You said Mr. Melancholia.
I think that was his name.
I think it's Mr. Melancholy.
Okay, well, all right. Let me just say this first. Okay, Mr. Melancholia.
Mr. Melancholy.
I think it's Mr. Melancholia.
Mr. Melancholy.
All right.
Played by Emma Portner.
Oh.
Do you know them?
Why does that sound so familiar?
They're a Canadian professional dancer.
Okay, I don't know.
Married to Elliot Page. Oh, but they got divorced in 2020.
Oh, that's probably why I know the name. So Mr. Melancholy is trying to kill them by incapacitate them and slowly suffocate them to death by burying them underground and giving them a poison that then sends them to the Midnight Realm, which is the reality that we're experiencing of boring suburban life with a lot of pain and doldrums and, kind of like blah, 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 blah. But Maddie's like, I realized this was not my real life, and I tried to kill myself and woke up back in the real world, the pink opaque, where I was trying to find you, and you're really Tara, and I have to rescue you. That's why she's come back to like make Owen go through with a similar crazy suicide attempt so they can wake up in the TV show where they really belong.
And why are we revealing this right now?
Just because I think it will help, like if we're talking about scene by scene without the context.
Okay.
I just think it's hard to talk about the movie.
Well, it's hard now that you bring that up. That brings a whole other, it's a huge twist to the movie.
It is.
So to go back 8 years,
go back to 96.
96, I think it jumps 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Owen's character, there's a kid version of himself in 96 who's played by a different actor.
He was great.
And then now we're 98, 2 years later, and that's when the character
Justice, I think is his name.
Yeah, so Ian Foreman's the younger Owen, and then Justice Smith appears. And there were some cuts to him in the forest. Mm-hmm.
And I intuitively understood that he was an adult in those scenes, even though they didn't say that.
And then before we get to 98, I'm pretty sure it shows Isabel in the forest.
Really?
And then it goes to 98. Remember? Because she does this really cheesy, like, smiling at the sun, and then it fades into 98, and now Owen's walking through the fair.
And wait, quickly, I just want to highlight too, one interesting thing is that, like you said, Isabel seems really happy and like She's in the sun. She's smiling. She's like embracing life. But Owen in the woods is staring into fire with no affect.
Which is a really important
I think that's
detail.
a very important detail. So then they're
Owen's
at the fair.
walking through the fair, and then it cuts to a woman looking forlornly or longingly and sadly in the distance. You kind of gather it's his mom.
We already met his mom, didn't we?
Yeah, but it's a big difference because she's wearing the scarf on her head.
Yeah.
That's when she says the line, "You must be worried about my health scare." And then it cuts to the scene of them on the bench together. And that was kind of my first oh no moment, because I feel like it was like a detail that was really like obvious in terms of the production design that she has cancer. But then I was kind of worried that they didn't have the confidence in their storytelling that they added that line in as ADR, because it wasn't like you don't see her say it.
Are you sure?
I think so. I think it's said under her as she's in that shot of her looking at Owen.
Oh,
and then
maybe.
it cuts to them on the bench. She says like, "I'm worried about you. You kind of seem withdrawn," and that kind of stuff.
See, I had a different reaction to that because, okay, the reason I think that they added that in is because like a black woman wearing a headscarf doesn't necessarily mean she's sick.
No.
It could be a hair choice. So I felt like that was why they did it. Because they don't really talk about her, which I think is good. They don't really talk about her health.
It just felt expositional to me. And then it becomes very clear later on that she died.
Well, he says that she dies, but it happens off
And
screen.
that was kind of another oh no moment for me is whenever Owen's like narrating the story. I'm like, why didn't you
Really?
start the movie with narration? It just kind of like popped up.
I liked it. I also liked that scene because she's asking me these questions he's not answering. And
I liked that.
And then he spits in the cotton candy.
I liked that, but it's like you're introducing this narration, and now we'll go into the next scene. Owen, he looks directly at the camera.
And he's talking.
And it kind of sets up that Maddie's taping the Pink Opaque on VHS for him. And then Owen's walking through the school.
It was one of my favorite parts.
And also what's new is they have animation on the screen, like a VHS tape of a drawing of the Pink Opaque.
And it's
then
notes.
And it's kind of like their version of a montage through animation to show that Maddie has been taping the Pink Opaque on VHS to give to Owen.
I really liked that part.
But it also kind of concerned me.
So interesting.
And
We had such
maybe
different responses.
I was kind of worried then too, because it's like you're telling us
I guess
without showing us, and I want to see all the different characters that were involved. I wish there was a more like montage to just like show the because I was just so curious. It was like a really important connection between the two of them. It just kind of happens off screen of Maddie handing them off to Owen.
this is why I think they did it this way, because both of them are bad communicators. They can't really talk. They can't look at one another in the eye. And he even said in voiceover, he's like, I was not brave enough to say more than like 3 words to Maddie at a time, even though he feels connected to her. And so it was to show that despite their affectless way of being, very like monotone, not really reacting a lot, and in spite of the fact that they don't really actually interact a lot, they're exchanging all these notes and passing back these TV shows. They have this like unspoken intimacy and connection that's really real, even
I
if
just would have rather have seen that. Like I would have like visually wanted to see the VHS tapes. I wanted to visually like see him watching it.
I liked the cool pink
because
font.
it's also like it's a narrative thing that like never really shows up through the rest of the movie. So
Yeah,
it just felt
that's true.
It's when I started becoming worried that it was going to be really disjointed. And
I don't know. I was hooked at that part.
Okay. And then does it go right to the bench scene by the stadium?
Probably, which was my, first of all, one thing I was obsessed with. There's a part where Maddie, her hair now is dark. It has like blonde highlights in it. It was like really interesting and like a shag. But okay, anyway, not really
And
important.
is this both our favorite scene of the movie?
It's absolutely our favorite scene. In fact, I have to tell you something.
What?
I'm going to update my sexual orientation for you and tell you that I like TV shows.
So what's the set it up for us? Because immediately as Owen said this line, I looked at Alice. I was like, I want to be like, it's you.
And I went like raise my arms and I cheered in the theater. I swear I'm usually a very polite theater goer.
Just like, if I were to pick one scene of this movie, this is it. And it just is so brilliant. And I just really wish it could have delivered on the themes that it presented in this scene.
I don't know. You know, I think I have a different take on this movie where it did really affect me, but in a negative way, but in a way that I think it was intentional. But yeah, so one thing I'll share about this scene that I immediately knew I was going to like it, Maddie's sitting on the bench eating her lunch alone. And it's like a bleacher that's not a full bleacher. And I'll explain why this is funny or relevant to me. It was like when I was in high school, my dad, my sister, and I used to go and like run at the track together. And then my dad would like run for very long distances. And, you know, I would just kind of go and like run a mile and then I'd be done. And so I would like read on this bench. And it looked exactly the same. I was like, this is crazy. And just a side note. Okay, so she's sitting there. Owen comes around. He sits down. When he like walks up, she like stiffens and like can't like look at him. And then he kind of sits like awkwardly far from her. And then they start talking, and he asks if Maddie's friend still comes over to watch the Pink Opaque on Saturday nights. And she's like, that asshole, no. Like, she told everyone I tried to touch
Her boobs.
her boobs and then wanted to be a cheerleader. We don't talk. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm just asking because like I really want to come back over and watch the Pink Opaque with you like live. And then I think she interprets this as him like maybe being like romantically interested in him. And so then she kind of comes out to him and is like,
you know, I like girls.
You know, I like girls, right? And he's like, oh, I mean, that's okay or whatever. And then it's like kind of like a pause. And you kind of can feel she feels glad that she did that, or like more closely connected to him. But then she goes, what about you?
Well, and also it seemed like it was a connection point. She was happy with his
response.
reaction,
Absolutely. Especially also it's the 90s. So I feel like that is an important detail. And then she goes, what about you? Do you like girls? And he goes, I don't know. And then
she says, do you like boys?
And he goes, I don't know. I think I just like TV shows. Which I loved.
The line.
And then Joe looked at me and I literally raised my arms up and cheered silently.
That was really, it was just like, yeah, the scene just had really great writing. And then Owen says,
like a fascinating line.
It feels like what does he say? It feels like
somebody has dug.
Whenever I think about
this, stuff like that.
Romance or stuff like that. He can't even say the word.
He says,
it feels like someone opens me up and like digs me out with a shovel. He said,
yeah, digs out my insides with a shovel. And then I don't want to look in there because I know that there's nothing. I wish I could remember the line. It was a great...
Or it's like that I still don't know how to feel or something like that.
I think it was... He definitely said like, I know there's nothing inside of there. Like there's nothing to it, but I'm still afraid to look and to explore it.
Whoa.
And I just thought that was really fascinating because like, I don't know, like from a coming out perspective, it's like you're supposed to know who you are so full. Like, oh, I'm this.
Yeah.
But then it's like, especially for teens, like you're exploring who you are and you just don't know. And it's kind of like a black box and it's really scary for any teen. And then that kind of like feeling like nothing or being nothing or having no feelings. I think that's like a very common teenage, as Taylor Swift might say, teenage petulance, right? Like it felt really like a fresh perspective on identity exploration. And then later on, I think if looking back on this scene, I think it might have something to do with gender identity as well in a way that I didn't think about in that moment. And also the digging out reference, I think because later on, Maddie like wants to bury them alive and is talking about digging big holes. Like it's just all really interesting.
Well, it's making me reflect on the first person that I came out to. I was a senior in high school.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, how shall I reveal this? I'll tell just the coming out part, not the reason why I did it. But and we were sitting on what the lifeguards sit on.
Lifeguard stand.
We were facing Lake Washington.
Wow.
And I came out to my friend and she kind of like didn't have like any surprise reaction, but then we just kind of like kept talking. I was like, wow, I did it.
Aww.
I did it.
That's so nice.
And then little did I know is that you have to continue doing it
every day of your life. And you'd be like, is this the right time? Should I do it now? Yeah. Maybe I just shouldn't do it. I don't know.
But yeah, just that scene just like spoke to me. I thought it was just really powerful and effective.
It was really authentic.
And I think that Justice is great, but Maddie, that actor,
Bridget or Brigitte, I don't know.
I just was so gripped every time they were on the screen.
I agree.
Even later on when they had to do some monologues that
were
questionable.
Long. Yeah. I thought that was just the standout scene of the movie for me. And one I'll think about both because it was like funny and unexpected. It was moving and also it was like really thought-provoking.
It was really thought-provoking.
And yeah, it had these like layers of authenticity to it, whether that be a half bleacher that I remember from my days of running around the high school track or a lifeguard stand.
Yeah. Wow, it's interestingly fun connection to that.
It's making me kind of think about how like, we were talking to some friends we didn't know that well, but they were talking about like people who would come out to them like in high school or like in their earlier life and just like that experience for them and how their own reactions, like they're like, oh, I said, I knew it. Or I didn't really have a reaction. I like needed like a few days to like actually have a response or whatever it was. And just they were kind of like unburdening themselves. And it was really cathartic to hear.
Yeah.
One, because it was like, so they were obviously very good friends and empathetic, but just this moment you share with somebody that's emotionally charged and for all parties involved.
Yeah. I just never thought,
liked that.
not until they brought it up, they're really thinking about it from the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, how do you respond when someone comes out to you? Like,
and they could like weigh on you. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely the high point of the movie. From there, I thought it was going to be...
Yeah, where do you think it was going?
I thought it was going to be like uplifting. And I was like really on board because I love TV. I feel like those characters I became obsessed with Lost right at that age. And when I was younger, I was obsessed with Harry Potter, like just like kind of living in that fantasy of the TV.
Yeah.
And you know, that was so inspiring. Look where I am now. I live in Hollywood for the Lost part of it all. But like instead of like living my life when I was in high school and like exploring, I was like living through these TV shows in a way. And so it really resonated with me. And I really thought it was going to be this like journey of them moving past that, but always having that connection. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm going to love this movie.
Yeah,
and then it ended up terrifying me and making me feel really bad.
I think is there a level of, it doesn't have to be limited to queer people, but I feel like a lot of queer people get really attached to like, especially TV and movies, because you get a window into a life that maybe you can't experience or a life you do want to experience. You can like project onto characters, and some people become like obsessive about it. But really with Isabel and Tara and the pink opaque, it's kind of like this fantasy of like, imagine you have this person that
you're connected with across the psychic plane.
Yeah. That you
defeat evil.
And so there was like definitely an attachment to
and
where
a fantasy.
Like Owen and Maddie really have a difficulty connecting with each other, even though there's so many similarities between the two of them. They could really like project onto these characters. And then what we kind of revealed later on is
the dangers of it.
The dangers of it. And then to literally believe that they are these characters.
Yeah.
Which kind of reminded me a little bit of Heavenly Creatures.
Yes.
Of Kate Winslet and
Melanie Lewinsky.
I didn't know it was going to turn into this, but it does become like a warning of the dangers of
fantasy.
Of this fantasy, of becoming consumed by it.
And I will say that Heavenly Creatures, when we watched that, I felt exactly the same at the end of the movie as I felt at the end of this movie.
I do think Heavenly Creatures was a little more...
Well, it's real. That's why.
Effective. Yes, it was. Yeah, I guess you should say it's a true story.
Yeah. Wait, but actually really quickly, I want to layer in one other thing about the coming out scene that I forgot to mention.
Yes, please.
Which is just that.
I would talk about the scene for hours.
Another thought I had while watching it was maybe it was like a gender identity, like how there was something missing that prevented them from even looking at his sexuality because there was this other piece of himself that he wasn't looking at.
Yes, which hasn't been revealed to us.
No. Later on, that kind of becomes clear. But the other thought I had while watching that scene was like, is this kind of an asexual coming out?
I thought that's what was going to happen.
Yeah. And I still think that could be part of it, especially because later on he's like, I have a family now and I love them, but you never see the family. And it was like really
says it in a way that's
strange.
Really like dark and disturbing. The movie kind of becomes like a David Lynch type.
Yeah.
Like people are saying really awkward and strange things that you wouldn't say in real life. And I'm like, should I laugh? Should I not laugh? Like what's going on? And that was one of those moments when he's like, and I have a family now and I'm really happy.
That made me... Ugh, my
really
skin
creepy.
crawl.
But yeah, to go back, was there something else you wanted to elaborate on the
just that like I was really interested in that because I don't think there's like a lot of asexual, like the only character I could think of is BoJack Horseman.
Todd.
Okay, Todd. And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I kind of like that it's not as straightforward as like two queer kids. I mean, well, it is two queer kids finding each other, but not so like,
asexual, I thought that was tied more to sexual identity.
It is.
Okay.
What do you mean?
I thought you said gender identity.
Well, I think later on in retrospect, when I'm looking at the later themes in the movie about gender and how each of these kids were tied to the girl characters in the pink opaque and how the pink opaque, even that phrase, the pink opaque suggests a gender identity confusion.
The pink opaque. Like what's that? What are those called? Onomatopoeias? Is that what it is? It's like boom, bang. Like, like the sounds of it.
It's a boom, bang.
The boom, bang. You know what I'm saying? Though, like the pink opaque. There's a really funny thing where it's kind of my complaint with Daddy-O or something so obvious is where it cuts to 8 years later. Maddie appears after she's been missing for so long. She's like, I know somewhere safe we can go. They go to this bar and they're sitting at the bar and like not for like, sure, like 8 years have passed for them. But for us, it's like literally like the next scene is Maddie's like, do you remember?
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. I was like, we remember the pink opaque.
That's one of the few things we know about this goddamn movie.
I completely agree with you. I thought that did not work for me. I was like,
and that's where the like writing kind of started sliding for
you. Okay.
But so yes, that wonderful bleacher scene happens, which I'd recommend people watch that scene on its own if you don't take the time to watch the movie.
It'll be put onto YouTube. But yeah, so like the reason I think it was tied to gender identity is just because in that moment I thought it was an asexual coming out, but then later on, there's a scene where it seems like they're like recreating the pink opaque Maddie and Owen that they keep cutting to. It's kind of creepy, but kind of not. And Owen's wearing like a dress to be like the Tara character. And so then when I think back on that scene, I feel like that someone's dug on my insides that I don't want to look. It makes me think like how if you can't establish one part of your identity, you can't really look at your sexuality.
Yeah, in reflection.
I think a lot of people confuse gender and sexuality and they're separate. And I feel like the best explanation I heard for better understand kind of questions of gender identity was hearing Bella Ramsey talk about when she was a little kid, if someone would mistake her for a little boy, they would be like...
Wait, do they go by they?
They go by all the pronouns. Yeah, like if someone mistook Bella for a little boy, it would make her really happy on the inside. And I just think back to when I was a kid, and I remember one time I was like coming in from like playing a sport, I had a baseball cap on, and my cousin, who was like a little kid, was like, "You're a boy," or "It's a boy," and I was like devastated. I was like, "No," and I remember my aunt was like really kind. I was like, he didn't mean that. Like he's just saying like you look more like your brother these days, and I was like, I was like so upset and convinced I was like the most hideous person to ever walk the planet. I was probably like 12 years old, but obviously I got over it. It doesn't affect me to this day, but. It's like to me be like that's my gender is like I'm a girl. Like I would hate to be considered a boy. And so if you have a different gender identity than what society sees you as, we don't really have. I don't know. I don't remember where I was going with that. Other than to say that kind of helped me understand.
Yeah, that's a great. I don't know if I ever had a moment like that But yeah, I'm sure if I was ever
Someone
called
said
a
you-
girl, I'd be very
I'd be so
upset. I wouldn't
upset.
be- yeah.
I was so upset. I was like, oh my God, I can never wear this baseball cap again.
Yeah. So I think it's important to acknowledge how people want to be perceived, how they feel they are.
Yeah.
Let's watch our step as we step back off our soapbox together.
Yes.
We're really high up on it.
But I agree that there's a distinct shift in the film.
But so what happens is we have this wonderful scene on the bleachers. I think they watch another episode of The Pink Opaque together again at Maddie's house. And then is that when we hear some banging and like a man yelling?
Yes.
And then Maddie sits on the stairs and be like, I'm going to escape.
I'm going to run away.
Run
It was
away.
really weird though, because it did sound like a man yelling, like presumably her stepfather, but it also sounded like a TV.
It didn't sound that angry was my thing. I was like, it just sounds like somebody's kind of like shutting the utensil drawer and just talking loudly.
It was interesting. It was, but I think that was intentional.
It was intentional, definitely. And then does Maddie sleep with Owen next to him?
I think so.
Every time that Owen sleeps in his sleeping bag, it's backlit by like an empty fish tank.
Oh, I didn't even notice. It was empty.
I mean, it was like full of like plants and stuff, but I didn't see any fish swimming around. And then I don't know if we see Owen's face, but he's like looking up and there's color static appearing.
Like the glow of a TV.
The glow of the TV.
Only there's
just
no
in the
TV
room.
above him. Then this is a really interesting scene. She wants him to run away with her.
Oh, yes. Oh,
And instead he goes back to the house he's pretending to do a sleepover at. He rings the doorbell. The mom answers the door and is like, oh, hi, Owen. Matt isn't here.
Yeah.
Kind of confused. And he's like, I need you to call my dad and tell him I've been lying and saying I've been sleeping at your house because I can't go with her. I don't want to go with her. Please stop her from taking me. I don't remember what he said, but it was really interesting.
it was interesting.
And really relatable. Because honestly, I feel like if I had someone say that to me, I would not. He said, I don't want to leave my family, is what he said.
Yeah.
I would have felt like I don't want to leave my family, but if I were to go over there, I'd probably just go along with it.
To be pressured into.
Yeah. So I was like, oh.
So that, I had my doubts about the structure of the movie. I was like nervous when they're doing like the animation on the screen and the narration. I felt like it was kind of mixing it up. And then this scene this is just where I felt like the actor couldn't quite pull off the
Emotion
of it. So
I agree with
I
that.
didn't really believe that. And then I understood what they wanted to do, but like emotionally, I just wasn't connected to that moment of like, can you please tell me? I didn't really.
I didn't have too many thoughts about, I didn't feel like taken out of it. I don't know. I guess now I'm seeing it more metaphorically in that she's about to go embrace her queer life and he's like, I can't do it.
Okay.
I can't do it. I don't want to leave my family.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't
thinking about that then, but now I kind of see it. That that's probably what they were.
Yeah.
Because it does follow
It did seem like, she's going to go off and explore herself.
And he's like, I don't want to.
He's scared, trapped behind. And then the next scene is he's kind of like narrating about how Maddie's gone missing and there's like police cars at their house and the TV was thrown out in the back.
And it's burning.
Burning.
Creepy.
And there was like crime scene tape everywhere.
I was freaked out by this.
Why? It sounded like she like ran like what?
I don't
It
know.
seemed like she was ready to run away. Like why did it seem like she was like murdered or something?
It was freaky.
And then is that when it transitions to 8 years later?
I think so.
And now Owen works in a movie theater. Mm-hmm. And there was popcorn. And
Love
this
it.
reminds me, in real life before the movie started, during the trailers, Allison turns to me. And Allison loves popcorn.
I do.
She
Oh.
was disappointed by
It got
popcorn
better.
at the Grove.
It got better.
She's like, do you think one day I ever won't like popcorn anymore? It's like, what?
It'd be so sad.
She's like, it would be so sad. This tastes like cardboard. And I was like, what? You're so it's part of your identity is you love popcorn.
Well, I mean, it would. That's why I guess I would be like such a big loss. Like I'd feel grief if I were ever to stop liking
It was
popcorn.
out of fear. I thought you were like
Yes.
making a statement like one day I will no longer.
Oh
like
no,
popcorn.
no.
I was like, what?
I was more afraid.
Oh, so 8 years have passed. Owen's working in the movie theater.
Yeah,
I used to work in a movie theater.
I was thinking that.
I had a
I was
really
thinking that.
Funny story. Basically, I worked mostly as an usher, and an usher, their job is to basically clean up the movie theater after people have been in it. And there was a surprising amount of vomit that I had to clean up as an usher, which you
That's
wouldn't think so. But I think
horrible.
what happened is people were bringing mini liquor bottles and get drunk
Ew.
and then get sick off the concession food and the
It's making me want to vomit.
It was so gross. I almost got fired once because some of the ushers, they go in and stand in like the alleyway before a movie gets over in the actual theater, and they'd watch like some of the end of the movie. And so I was like with two other guys and we were like doing this and like watching the end of, I think it was like The Mummy 3. And we all got called into the office because apparently like our boss couldn't find us when they needed us to clean up the theater. And they each called us one by one. And the two people ahead of me, they both got fired because they had strikes against them. And because it was my first strike, I didn't get fired. And it was just so funny because one day I was what I considered to be an upgrade to working at the concession stand.
That is an upgrade.
And what was great about that is like ushers, like it was so boring. Like most of the time was spent in the back room just waiting to clean up the theater. But concessions. It was live, like people coming up to order things. You had to like make things. And this was like a more like gourmet movie theater. So they had like a whole espresso machine and all these different like basically like pizzas and nachos, but all just required you kind of like throwing them. And of course, like popcorn and that kind of stuff. But most of it's like you just had to like heat things in a microwave was the biggest thing. But the espresso machine, like it was an actual espresso machine. And I had maybe an hour of training. And something about me is I don't retain information very well, especially if I'm overwhelmed. I just kind of like shut things out. And maybe from an outside perspective, it seems like I don't care, but really it's because I'm so anxious that I get overwhelmed and I just kind of block it all out. So they're teaching me how to make espresso, mochas, lattes, Americanos. I'm not retaining any of this. I don't know what the difference is.
And you didn't drink coffee back then, did you?
I think I was, but I'd have just like the coffee with the creamer in it that my parents had at their house. So I like was not well vested in what these drinks were, which in the end, it's all different variations of milk. I get trained for like an hour, and the first day I'm working, I was shocked. I think maybe why I blocked it out is because like, how many people are ordering coffee in a movie theater? I was surprised how many people ordered coffee in a movie theater.
And it's Seattle, Joe.
I don't even know what they were ordering, but I like had to be making the most like crazy concoctions. Like I'm sure someone would probably order a latte, and I probably just like gave them like steamed milk without even espresso in it. Or they'd order like a mocha and I just make a hot chocolate. Like I didn't like, know what I was doing. And because it was like so like chaotic and like huge lines, like nobody could really, it wasn't like Starbucks. Nobody really came back to complain because they probably like knew it was a movie theater. I'm not going to do what I'm doing. But this is such a tangent, but I'm sorry.
I'm enjoying it.
One person came up to me. They quizzed me and they're like, do you know the name of the band in the 90s? And they got in trouble for lip syncing. And I was like, oh, Milli Vanilli. And he was like, very good. And he had a sleeve of quarters. He slid the quarters.
You've never told me this part of the story.
As a tip.
That is really weird.
The one and only tip I got. And then he winked at me and walked away. And then another time too, there was I think The Dark Knight was coming out when I worked in the movie theater. And part of our job as ushers is there'd be massive lines just getting into the theater alone, like the specific theater as the other theater was coming out. So part of our job was like to almost stand along the line of security to make sure nobody was cutting.
Of course.
And I just remember like zoning out and staring off into the distance. And one guy comes up to me and he says, hey, you should smile more.
Oh,
it's like,
you did tell me.
How dare you? How dare you?
You experienced something that women experience all the time.
And then I think towards the end, I ended up doing the ticket stubs at the front, which was cush. That was like the best.
I mean, that sounds so
nice.
All you
have to do is just sit
there and pull the tickets.
Yeah. So that was my.
So was that your first job?
No, I worked at Pottery Barn with my sister, and I was in the back, and she was in the front, and I was just like, I hated that. We were not even quiet quitting. We just didn't show up to work. It was during the winter season, so we were like winter hires.
You were like the seasonal
But we both
hires.
decided to stop to go to work. What was your first job?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Paw Prints of Stone Harbor. They sell everything that a dog might need. Costumes, leashes, baked dog treats from the bakery section that looked like real cookies.
I didn't know you worked there.
Oh yeah. And the owner, he loved dogs. He gave me a big book. I had to memorize all the breeds.
Did they carry Dog Fancy at this establishment?
They probably did. And like he was just kind of a quirky guy. And there was like a quirky lady that worked there. The cast of characters. And then me, I was like terrified of making a mistake with change. In my mind, I was like sure I was going to get it wrong. People were going to yell at me. I was afraid of answering the phone. I was just like basically living in fear. I mean, every day I was just terrified of something going wrong and it being my fault. And I don't know, the whole dog industry would come crashing down around me. But I remember at the end of the summer, I was like saying goodbye to my boss. And he's like, you're a really great worker, so you should come back next year. But if you do, you need to work more days. And I literally took one day off. And I got a different job the next summer. I worked at a bakery, which was great, amazing bakery. And then I worked at a restaurant, which was less great of an experience. Basically, this shore town's on a 7-mile island. It's a very small place, but I would do everything by power. And my boss used to sit outside in like a plastic lawn chair of his store. And so I would be like terrified. I didn't want him to see me because I was just like, I quit. I never went back. He probably hates me. Every time I would go to 96th Street, I would like make sure I was on the other side of the street. Yeah. If I saw him, I'd like turn around on my heel and run away. And this lasted into my early 20s. I was like afraid to see this man who probably didn't remember me. And to this day, I'm like, am I still afraid? Like if I were to go back and he was sitting outside, would I say hello? Like am I an evolved enough person? I think I would now, but it's an open question.
So Owen's working in this movie theater. Time has passed. He hasn't seen Maddie for a long time. And then I forget what happens. Are we like he's just watching like obsessively rewatching The Pink Opaque, is that right?
I think it was like he drives home one day, an electrical wire is down from work.
Oh,
all the pieces of the book that she used to read are in the street.
He's driving, the road's blocked because the electric pole has fallen down and there's a wire like flopping around everywhere. He gets out of his car, which mistake number one. And then he says, hello, is anybody there?
It was weird.
And it's like, no.
It was really
weird. And there were all
weird.
these like, yeah, all the like torn
pages,
shreds of like the Pink Opaque episode guides,
yeah.
I believe.
And then he goes home. This is when I started to get, this movie really creeped me out, guys. When he goes home, his dad's in the TV room like he's been often, staring at the TV.
But then he looks over at Owen.
Well, and Owen says, sorry, I'm late. There was a downed electrical wire. And then the dad just like stares at him, and the dad's like bald now. It was really creepy. And like they held on it for several moments, and I was like, I was freaked out.
I wasn't freaked out. I was a bit annoyed because it started becoming like, oh no, is this going to be... Because I was still latched onto the bench scene so much where there was just so much substance in there. And then for some reason, this shot in particular where they just like held on it, like the composition was really well done. Yes, it was really creepy. But I was like, oh no, is this going to be a thing where it's like style over substance? Like I was starting to worry here, like what... I was afraid that the themes that I thought happened at the stadium scene, I was afraid they weren't going to be able to deliver on it. And which the movie kind of transforms in surprising ways that which I liked. In other parts, I was kind of exhausted and confused by.
Yeah, I mean, because what basically happens after that is he's in the grocery store and this woman appears. It's clearly, very obviously Maddie with a haircut.
And he turns around and says, can I help you, ma'am? And
she's like, do you remember me? And then it was really sweet, and they gave her a big hug. I really liked that.
I feel like they could have done more with like the lighting, like cover her face up like in shadow, something like that. Like why make it so, it's so obviously her.
Do you think it has something to do with because she was kind of more masculine presenting now, and so is it something
a short haircut?
Yeah. Do you think it's something to do with like
you don't recognize?
He doesn't want to think about that stuff, so he won't even recognize this person he loved. I don't know. It didn't bother me.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird because there was nobody in the store.
And then Owen walks over to Maddie, and then it cuts to this really wide shot. They're in like the lower half of the screen. It's from their profiles as Owen's walking to Maddie. And there's 3 American flags.
Yeah.
Very largely centered in the frame, which take up most of the shot. And I was like, what are you trying to say? I was really questioning the composition of the shot
that struck me. Maybe I'm just a simple, like, whoa. But then she says, I can take us somewhere we can talk.
And then they walk out to the parking lot, and there's the Family Fun Center
poster.
Advertisement is there. And then he agrees to go. Then it cuts to...
This part was like...
a music scene.
So strange.
Of this band performing what we assume is a bar, but it's like focused on this lead singer.
It was great.
And then it cuts to...
Phoebe
Bridgers is there.
Phoebe Bridgers. I was like...
guitar and singing like background vocals.
It's like Phoebe.
But it was a really like alluring song, which you said Caroline Polachek has something to do with this, which...
Story alert! I have heard the story so many times, but I would love to hear it.
One of the first concerts I went to in LA, I went to Caroline Polachek's concert at the Fonda Theater in Hollywood when her first album, which I love, came out. And we're like not even that far into the set. And Caroline's just kind of this very like ethereal, spiritual singer.
Wasn't the scene dark?
And all the lighting was like really dark. And there was all this like smoke coming up on the stage. And she's like quietly like singing to the audience, like singing these like hymns almost. She's walking towards the audience, and all of a sudden she like lets out kind of like a yelp and like disappears from view. And everyone's like, oh my God, what's happening? And then all of a sudden, like, it's going on for a little too long, and all of a sudden all the house lights come on, and you just see Caroline Polachek crawl back on stage. She didn't see where the edge of the stage was, and it had fallen off the stage. And we were not that far into the set. She continued to carry on and perform the rest of the show like nothing had happened. And then the following day, it cracked me up. I had to seek out her Twitter, and she had tweeted, LA, I fell for you hard last night, which I think was great. But yeah, she was involved in the music of this movie.
I think so.
And
they were all original songs,
I didn't recognize the song. Okay, yeah. So she maybe had written in it. And I was really, I think you said you also were like,
I was alert. I was like,
by
it was really evocative and like, and you know what's interesting about it? Like the song had deep feeling, except for the main singer who was a little bit more performative. There's just like an affectless quality. Like I feel like this whole movie is dealing with like deeper things under the surface.
Yeah.
But then the way that the actors have been instructed to act is to kind of delete all emotion from their performance. Yeah. And sometimes that worked really well, and sometimes it didn't.
It got grating a little bit at times. So then it cuts to Maddie and Owen are at the bar. Mm-hmm. And then that's where we had kind of talked about this already, where Maddie reveals like, oh, like the Pink Opaque, like I went to this place and it was real. That's where I've been.
Yes.
And don't you remember, like you were there too. And then we see like a figure in like a bathroom with
just the dress, really.
The dress, but they're shirtless. But you see like pink bottoms.
Yeah.
And then like a
spaghetti strap.
But you don't even see that pulled up.
You don't.
It's literally just like we find out it's like spaghetti strap dress folded down. But so it's like, and I was like, oh, that kind of looks like Owen maybe. Or I think they were trying to be like, is it Tara? Is it Owen? Who is it? And then there was like, it was almost like film was playing back. There was like a cigarette burn in the film. And then it cuts back to
the bar.
Maddie and Owen in the bar. And then more is revealed. And Maddie's like, don't you remember? Like, I'm telling you things you probably already know. Then it's like, now Owen is walking in the street or the stadium.
Oh.
The spaghetti dress is pulled up. It's very clearly he's wearing this pink dress.
Yeah.
And then is Maddie in like more kind of like leather?
I think what's interesting is that Maddie's transformation is already complete.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the hair, it mirrors the girl's hair.
And we didn't say when Maddie first appears in the grocery store, she looks disheveled a little bit, like a little dirty, like a little rough.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of like a greaser look.
Yes, it did. But it literally looked kind of like there was like dirt on them, which is important because later on. So Maddie's like, don't you remember we were there? And they're walking at the stadium. And then they walked to like the center of the field. And I forget what happened. Well,
actually, I think that was a little bit later.
Oh.
She says, don't you remember this? And then he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you saying? And she's like, you're going to remember, I'm going to be at the high school tomorrow night. So I hope you'll be there. This is when the movie started to really freak me out because I thought when they were flashing to these flashbacks, what I thought interpreted as flashbacks of Owen in the dress, I got kind of freaked out that like, are they trying to tell us that like there was no the pink opaque and they were like creating it themselves and like taping it, like something weird's going on here, and it was going to be revealed that like there's been some big twist where Owen like has deleted something from his memory about his past, and I just like got really freaked out by that. It really scared me. I was like, oh, I don't know.
I honestly had a similar reaction. I don't know if I would articulate it in the same way, but I have been wondering if I like pick and choose memories from childhood and I like don't remember everything. It kind of frightened me at the thought of are the things that have gone on in childhood that I've like blocked from my memory and don't remember, because memory is a very tricky thing. And so it did make it, maybe it was the filmmaker's intention, which they did a really good job on. It kind of made me fear, like, are there things that have happened in my childhood or like my like coming of age, like I just like completely have forgotten about or like retooled them, which is a really scary thought to have.
Especially because earlier in the movie, the way they presented the dad as this like terrifying figure without really having him do much, except clearly demonstrating that Owen was afraid of him. And then like the creaking stairs and him in that sleeping bag and the threat of the stepdad. I just thought there was going to be like an abuse element to this story.
And him wheezing.
Oh, that was
I forgot about the wheezing. Every time he was in the sleeping bag at Maddie's or showing him like sleep, he'd like be like wheezing. I didn't really know what was going on.
Well, he had asthma. He was bringing his inhaler, which is interesting because of the whole buried alive thing. Was he really suffocating? Is I think what slowly over time is what I think they were going for. But
I don't think they quite landed that.
No, I don't think so. And so that part just made me feel like, is there some kind of is going to a very dark place of abuse? Like I don't want to watch that. Like this is just getting freaky.
That's so fun. I had the same kind of concern where if this is what I like did not want to visit this,
because I felt like I had that fear when the stairs were creaking specifically, and then I was like, oh, they're not going there, and so then I felt relieved. And then I was like, oh no, they tricked me into thinking this wasn't an abuse story, yet it is.
Was there a time where the stairs were creaking and we like didn't see?
Kind of, yes.
Was that mixed in as like the montage of all this stuff? Okay, it
was freaky.
Wow, I didn't even articulate it until you like brought it up now. But I think I really did have the same. Wow, it's really interesting.
Because that's a very common, I feel like I've seen that in other stories that do deal with abuse, where you don't see a lot of stuff, but you hear like, you see a person sleeping, you hear scary sounds, you kind of intuit that there's like an adult in the room. I was just really freaked out that was going to be what the story was about. And then it wasn't. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I apologize if I already brought this up, but we went in like blindly, like not really knowing what the movie was about, like not even the genre, knowing it. And there's a lot of times where I'll recommend or like bring friends along, and I almost feel kind of like a personal responsibility of like the journey they have on this movie. And if it's like not going well, I'll feel really like subconscious. Like one time I took my parents to see
Leave the World Behind.
I saw Leave the World Behind, and I just like felt like personally responsible for bringing them there. And it was just a very like suspenseful movie, and I was sitting in between them, and there were times where my skin was crawling, and I was like, I didn't know if I like should turn to them and tell them we should leave the theater, because I just felt like they weren't enjoying it, or they were like didn't like it at all.
But then they loved it.
And they're like, we liked it. I feel like they felt bad that I felt so badly that they thought that they didn't like it. It was really intense. But for some reason, because I like didn't have like any concept of it, or maybe it's just because I know you so well too. Like I didn't feel personally. I guess what I'm saying is I didn't feel responsible.
I think I enjoy seeing. The only time I'm annoyed I saw movies if it's really, really boring and bad. But otherwise, I'm kind of down to see.
This movie was not boring.
No, I was definitely entertained. That's why I think we heard someone leaving the theater compare it to Beau Was Afraid.
Yeah,
and they're like, Beau Was Afraid at least showed me stuff. And I'm like,
well, because they compared it to like the Odyssey. Like there's an Odyssey in Beau Was Afraid, and you like see it, and here there's a lot of, especially in the second half,
monologues of the story.
Monologues, which they could have really just
I agree, but I just felt like this one maybe I was like more engaged.
There was an emotional connection,
yes,
which is why
did not exist in Beau's Afraid.
Beau's Afraid didn't exist, so I was disappointed and I was so
pissed,
fucking angry at that movie.
We hate that movie,
I hate that movie
and I don't
so
like
much.
saying that. I don't say that lightly. This movie was annoying.
Don't waste your time.
Don't see it.
But I saw the TV Glow. Part of like why I was upset in the second half is because they just did such a good job at making me emotionally care, especially at that bleacher scene.
Yeah.
That when they'd go into these long monologues, I was like more like disappointed. Like, I'm so disappointed.
I know.
I want to stick with these characters emotionally, and you're like hiding it from me.
Instead, just made me personally, I was having an experience where I was just getting more and more freaked out.
And so where
we were still in the bar. Then they cut to like. This is when I think when it started to make me feel
uneasy.
Not just that, but then it cuts to another singer's coming on the stage.
Oh my God.
Which I guess does represent the two halves of the movie.
Yeah.
And then it's like
it's a real transition.
Screamo music person, and it goes on for so long, and I was so physically uncomfortable listening to this that Joe thought I was crying, but I was just like covering my eyes, like laughing and like feeling really like, oh, please let this end, please let this end. And Joe was like, what's going on? That's
your like nervous thing that you do, right? Is you like laugh when you're uncomfortable? Is that right?
I think so. Because
it's like the singer comes on, I'm not sure on the specifics, but they have like white powder on their face, like black lipstick, black mascara. Their hair is like gelled into like these pointy like mohawk, long hair but gelled back.
Yeah.
What's interesting is like they're singing like not
it's beautiful singing.
It's beautiful singing, but what was kind of terrifying about it is like it'd be like really beautiful, like low like singing, and then also it'd be like
and I was like,
and then it'd be like low like singing again. And they just like continue going on, and the filmmaker I think kind of made their point and then some, and then I was kind of like, all right,
you're like no, let's move on. No more.
And so that was definitely probably the severe transition into like the later half of the movie. And where would you say is like Act 3 of this?
Well, I think Act 3 was when Owen does go meet her at the high school, and they go into like the planet thing.
Well, first you don't really know where they are, right?
Well, she
a shot on Maddie, like, and you see like this
stars.
Like curved wall, and you see like you assume it's like a planetarium. There's like a projector like projecting like.
But I knew where they were because in the beginning of the movie, she says, oh, voting night's so fun at the school. It's like something different. It's like when they put the planetarium up. So that's why I knew they were in the school. And she also said, meet me at the school.
It's showing the constellations and then whatever. I don't remember the gist of the monologue.
The monologue is telling the story of where she's been, which is why it reminded me of The Leftovers, because The Leftovers similarly has Carrie Coon relay this huge story about where she's been without showing you any of it. And that's why I thought they were going with this, like, it's going to be him being like, I believe you and I'm right there with you, even though this sounds far-fetched and we don't get to see, seeing is believing, we don't get to see it, which is what The Leftovers did. But instead, he's like, Maddie, that's crazy. You're not from the TV show. The TV show is a TV show. I'm not like secretly in the wrong world. What's going on? She's like, no, you are. I have an idea. Let's go to the fields.
But so something that happens in the scene though, and I could be wrong, but it's like the constellations, then all of a sudden it like fills in the like mythological creature, like not creatures, but like are they Greek gods? Like
it was like Draco, Hercules, blah, blah, blah.
I heard someone in the theater like chuckle too. Like I think they thought it was silly. And then I forget if it like rotates, because I don't think we've seen Owen this whole time. Like Maddie's giving the big long monologue.
It's really focused on her.
But am I wrong? This could be in my memory wrong, but it cuts to Owen, and then isn't the ceiling now
normal? No,
it's the colored. Remember in the beginning of the movie when he's a child? And those like blow up, like, you know, when you like,
they did show that.
Doesn't the ceiling become that like colored gymboree, like
maybe
gym play thing? I think they were trying to do something with that. And then they walk out into the fields.
I mean, what struck me about so in the beginning, they're like, I don't know if anyone's ever played that game in gym class where there's a big sheet that everybody like throws up into the air, and then you can like
inside.
Yeah. And it was like, I think the colors of the bisexual flag specifically, like purple and blue or whatever, pink, whatever it was. And the idea that like you're a kid and you're able to like safely explore fantasy and who you're going to be. It's safer when you're a child to think about those things than as an adult. I don't know. I'm not really sure. And then they're under the stars, which is the whole world. Who really knows? I don't know.
Yeah. Is there another monologue in the fields?
Well, yeah. Where she's like, so basically what happened was that she asked someone to bury her alive.
Oh, yes.
And then she's talking about how the bad guy, Mr. Melancholy, had buried both of them alive at the summer camp because they were trying to reunite in person for the first time.
Yeah.
And he gave them a poison, which would slowly kill them and would send them to the midnight realm while they're buried separately under the ground. And then they would live out their lives here in the reality we're seeing.
And then I thought was
she's saying we have to bury ourselves again to get back to.
Oh, I kind of missed
that's what she was saying. She wanted to bury them alive.
Okay.
And he was like, this really funny thing happened though.
What?
She's just, again, it's really like seriously, they like cut to a wide shot and they're like hugging, I think. And then he doesn't really push her, but he like,
that's something, yeah.
he like jumps back and she like falls over and then he just like sprints away.
But before that happens.
And I was like, yeah, run, man.
Yeah.
Get away from her.
Yeah. There's so much was happening. I was a little overwhelmed that I
was just feeling so much dread and like fear. I was like
zoned out. But what did stick with me is Maddie brought up being like, oh, and this guy that always seemed to like me, I convinced him to like bury me, and he didn't realize what he was doing
because she was already in the coffin. That's why. It's really bizarre. It was really freaky.
And then being like, did she start to have dread? Like, didn't want to go through with it, or
yeah, because she's of course she's stuck under the ground.
And then I don't know why specifically to specify. This is gross. Warning to say that
I don't want to hear it again. I don't want to hear it again. Basically, everything that happens when you're under the ground,
bodily functions.
She describes it. It's very disturbing. Yeah. And also, one thing we forgot to mention is right before this scene. This is also contributing to my dread. He does go home and he says some voiceover. I locked myself in the house. Oh no, this is right after. Oh, he runs away. He goes, I locked myself in the house for days. But then he starts rewatching the show,
and he's like, I rewatched the final episode. Right?
Oh, yeah, that was right before. I think it was interspersed.
No, I think because I think Maddie kind of was like.
Yeah, you're
she's
right.
Like describing all of it, and I was like, "Don't tell me, show me." And then they show us, and I'm like, "I would have been fine. You just told us."
It was so creepy.
All of a sudden, the show, I'd say in the beginning, it was kind of like equal parts cheesy, but then when it shows the ice cream man, it was like really like intense. But then it cut back to Tara and Isabel by the lake, and Mr. Melancholy is like so like corny looking. He's like, "That's the big bad." He's silly, but now it's showing.
Creepy.
It's showing like this. It's supposed to be the final episode of the whole show, like the last thing, and. It's so intense and everything that Maddie was describing of them being buried alive. Isabel's like vomiting this like blue goo,
poison, and
being poisoned.
Mr. Melancholy is like Mr. Melancholy's
there, like terrifying.
It was so disturbing.
And I think it was played by Owen. I think Owen was.
I was wondering that.
But wait, I said it was.
But maybe it was
Elliot
two people.
Page's ex. But it sounded like Owen. But it was so like this like real life moon figure, like freaky. And it's just like coming like at the screen and. So freaky and basically it was kind of like how like in our like childhood memories, like how sometimes things that we remember aren't as scary as we think they are, but here it's like it was flipped. It was like even more terrifying. Yeah. It was like and you notice the conclusion of the whole show is like horrific.
Well, it ends with them and they both die, and that was the and then it got canceled.
And it got canceled. Horrific.
Which felt like a commentary on like. Because didn't that happen with Buffy? Didn't you say that she died or Angel died and then it was supposed to be the end and then they brought it back?
There was like, I think there were a few times where it got like canceled when it was on.
And then someone had died. But didn't Buffy die?
FX. She sacrificed herself for her sister, I believe. And that was supposed to be the end, but then they got renewed.
And then she comes back to life.
And then come back to life. And then it's like her like dealing with that. But yeah, I definitely think there was like a connection of.
And the bury your gays trope I was always talking about. Because like they literally get buried.
Yeah.
And then. It's canceled.
Yeah.
And they're dead.
Isabel and Tara, it's like never explicitly
subtextual.
It's subtextual.
Yeah. But still, I thought that was an interesting connection.
And then this whole like dramatic thing happens.
I hated this part. This part freaked me out.
Wait, what happens?
So you remember then the dad comes into the house and the TV's blaring downstairs in the basement. He goes downstairs and Owen's head is stuck in the TV like with all this like weird static. Oh. And the dad's trying to pull him out and he's like, no, let me go back in. And then he takes him up to the like shower. Also has like abuse undertones. The whole thing like really freaked me out. I was like, I cannot handle this.
The shower's like steaming and the dad's like watching the son like put his head in the water. But he's not in the shower. And then he starts vomiting the blue goo also.
Yeah.
And then I think this happens afterwards. Then the button of this whole wonderful, miserable scene is then Owen opens the front door and the actors of the Nickelodeon show Pete and Pete are in the street looking at Owen.
They look weird and scared and concerned. Really like pale, like they're dead. Because like he's a TV. The whole idea is that they're these two TV characters who've been accidentally put outside of the TV. I really didn't like. I was really freaked out by this. It was
really disturbing. And then does it cut to 20 years later? 20 years later,
has this horrible wheezing,
and he got hired at the Family Fun Center. Because
the movie theater closed.
They're
at a birthday party. They're like forced to like sing happy birthday to like a snotty kid. And the kid is like in one of those money machines trying to collect all the money. And I don't know if you noticed, the top of it said, "You are dying." No. Yeah, it said, "You are dying." And I was like, is this some kind of commentary? I was like, this is really disturbing. This is too much.
And then we didn't bring him out at the movie theater 20 years prior. Owen walked in on like one of his like coworkers like
yes, that scene I
having
really
sex with a
hated.
woman, and then they're like in a garage, and the coworker's like making fun of like, oh, she said she likes you, and if you want
can you look me in the eye? Can you look me in the eye? I was just like, oh, this is so awful.
And then out there, the Family Fun Center. Oh, I guess he's the one that hired him at the Family Fun Center. He's there too.
But they look the same. It just was, and then they're singing "Happy Birthday" to this kid. And it's like, I already feel so uncomfortable because it's like so sad and depressing. The camera angles are becoming really weird too. They're like, everything's like shot from above. Owen's like in reality, but they aren't in reality. All of a sudden, it's like, what's going on? Then everybody freezes. Oh, no, then he starts,
break room.
No, before that, they're singing. And then he starts screaming, help me, I'm dying, help me. And everybody else freezes. And I was like, and the screaming was horrible. And then he goes to the bathroom.
Well, but no, I wasn't scared in this moment though. When Owen I was cringing.
Really? I was so freaked out.
And then he leans forward. He's like, Mom. He's screaming for his mother. And like, everyone's frozen. And then it cuts to him being in the bathroom. He's locked
the door.
The bathroom, and the coworkers like, or
this is like we're almost at the end of the movie.
Is knocking on the door like, hey, what's going on? And he's on the floor like shirtless
with a box cutter.
Oh my!
I was like really upset about this. And then he cuts.
I thought it was an inhaler from a distance. And then he's like bringing it to his chest. What a weird place to bring her inhaler.
I wasn't watching. I thought he was about to.
Yeah, and that's when Allison I saw.
I was covering my eyes. I thought it was going to be very gruesome, but it actually wasn't. It was like him cutting into
gruesome. It was like.
But then inside of him was the TV. That didn't really bother me. It was kind of silly.
It was silly. But yeah, it was like, it cuts to this really extreme close-up of his chest, like cutting through it. And then it's like to like peel it open. Just the sound effects are so gross. And yeah, he's looking in the mirror, and the static, like a blue static is like shooting through and like reflecting off the mirror as he's looking at himself. He's
fine. Doesn't kill him. He leaves. And he's walking through the Family Fun Center. And he's going, you know what's interesting? Okay, I just realized this. He's going past everybody, employees, people who are there for fun. And he keeps going, I'm sorry about what just happened. I'm sorry, I'm on a new medication. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of the very beginning where I forget why, but the very first sleepover, Maddie says something to him and he says, I'm sorry. And then she says, don't apologize. There's something about being apologetic.
Does he also apologize when he goes to the neighbor's house and is like, you have to tell my dad that I've been lying this whole time?
Yeah, he probably does.
He's like almost being like apologetic about it.
Yeah.
There's some connection. I didn't quite.
Apologizing for being someone taking a space. Is that what it is? Yeah, I don't know.
And so it's kind of like this all ties back to like the bleacher scene again, where he's opened himself up
and there's nothing,
and he's been hollowed out. All there is the TV static.
Yeah.
And my interpretation of it was a really scary thought, because I love television, I love movies. Is like just like the consumption of this media, and you're like, instead of living your life, you've become this is my interpretation. You've become consumed with other people's stories, and in this case, like not real people.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like your life has evaporated. You haven't accepted who you are, and you've like projected so much of yourself onto like not real people that like, who are you yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was definitely part of it. I also have a thought that like TV shows are pop culture. It gives us messages about how we're supposed to be in the world. And then like queer people like try and find, they have to glom onto this like subtextual story, right? And then it's like trying to see like the images of who we are to like understand ourselves versus just being yourself and not really worrying if it's reflected on the screen. I don't really know, something like that. And
I'm sorry, you can't hear it. And I wonder if it's going to come up in the audio, but there's been a lot of audio static.
Really?
During this episode.
Well, that's a little freaky.
In a movie that talks about TV static.
I don't like that. Okay, yeah. So I think the reason this really scared me, this movie.
And also we'll talk about later, but you did see this movie during the daytime.
Yes, so I guess that proves the theory wrong, because you don't seem to have liked it that much.
But now as we're talking about it, I walked away with really strong feelings.
I did too.
Thing, and it was very effective.
I just feel like I left the movie like we were gonna do this silly thing, and we had just bought binoculars to do a promo for QCC, and we got that at a toy store. And when we checked out, the man's like, "Do you want to gift wrap it?" And I was like, "No, thank you." And he was like, "All right, have fun." And so we sit down in the theater.
Picture after the movie.
I was like, "What if you're like looking at the screen with the binoculars?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then the movie ended. I was like, I can't do that. I can't. We have to leave. It's like, I just feel so freaked out. But I think my biggest fears always have to do with like either being super trapped or losing your mind and like not knowing what reality is. Basically loss of control, I think is really what it comes down to. But I think I wrote it down. Yeah. And this kind of ties back to a story where the other thing that's really scared me that I've watched, I feel like I'm usually not very deeply affected and I can like fall asleep after a scary movie, no problem. But one time, did we already talk about this on the podcast?
What?
The Yellow Jacket stuff?
Oh.
Yeah, we're probably going to do Yellow Jackets when it comes back. You know what? I'm just going to say that similarly, there was a character on that show who wakes up in the middle of the night and like does stuff and doesn't remember it during the day. And so like this idea of two lives and how one might not be real, I don't know, it just like really disturbs me. And so that's really, I think, what was going on here for me.
This movie tapped into my fear. We're almost at the end. We
are at the end.
But there's a few things that happen. We mentioned it, but now it's like he talks about, it's a wide shot of a house. And I was like, where are we? He's like, my dad died of a stroke and I took over the house and I decided to live there. And I was like, oh, I feel like they didn't really establish what the house was. And
they said the Pink Opaque is now on streaming.
Well, that was funny. But then that's when it cuts to the front door. A flat screen TV has been delivered.
Yeah.
And that's when he's pulling. He's like, I have a family now and I'm really happy.
But wasn't that before the scene? I thought the very last scene in the movie.
I thought it was a wide shot of the house. Then it goes up to the close up where he's bringing the TV in. I could be wrong. It's mixed up.
I thought the very last scene was him leaving the fun center saying, I'm sorry. And then it cut to black. Okay.
That was upsetting. But I think it was at the house. He's like, and now the Pink Opaque's on streaming, and it's kind of just like comically like
cheesy. And they show the real scene, and it's like the most PG,
which is
hilarious, silly thing.
Reversed again. So it's kind of like you watch things as a child, they really affect you, really disturb you, and then you revisit them as an adult, and you're like, this is so corny. Like, why did I think this was
scary?
At all scary? So it's kind of like, yeah, they reversed it and then reversed it again, and so yeah, it's a lot cheesier than he remembered, and then. He did, and this is tapped into my fear, is he talked about how how time moves so quickly now.
Yeah.
And like time
did make me think of you when he was saying that.
Turns into seconds, and I've talked about on this podcast before. And that taps into my fear. Just it's like time is just I don't know why it happens, but you just feel like there's just like this momentum where I'm like, how like the days.
The years start coming and they don't start coming.
They really do, that was really, it really did tap into, it really disturbed me. And then I think it cuts back to his workplace. And then that's when he's like
saying he's sorry,
apologizing. And then it didn't really feel like a definitive ending. And I was like, please don't cut to credits. Please don't cut to credits. And then it cuts to the credits. I was like,
thank God. I can't watch any more of this movie because I thought it was effective. Like, I feel like the emotion that they wanted to leave me with, I feel like they succeeded. Yeah. I can't say for sure I know what the movie was about, but I just feel like a lot was swirling in there.
Yeah. I feel like I walked out not feeling that way, but now that we've processed this, we're processing this in real time on this podcast. I feel like it did actually affect me a lot more than I realized. Oh, that's their coffee timer. We made coffee when we came back home.
We did. I'm just gonna quickly look at my notes, see if there's anything else.
Well, there were some reactions when we were leaving the theater. I went to the bathroom.
Yes, do tell.
Afterwards, and I hear someone in the stall next to me loudly proclaim, "I've taken shits better than that."
Oh my God.
And then, as you said, we were leaving the Grove, and someone was like, "Allison and Bo is afraid. They showed us the Odyssey."
And I was like, "No, sir. Yeah. No. I would rather see this again than see Bo is afraid." But the people in my bathroom, they were just these young girls, and they were like, at first I thought it was going to be like a normal, not normal, just like just a movie. And then it was something else. We got a package. That's a man. You were talking like this man was behind you.
At our place?
Yeah, right out. I was
it's the vertical tripod stand to film our promo.
Yay! Guys, it's promo. It's going to be great.
It's gonna be fun.
We're so fun and funny, even maybe not in this one because we're going to talk about a little freaky of a movie, but...
I've kind of changed my opinion as we've talked about this movie. It really did deeply affect me. And it was actually a pretty disturbing and moving experience. And I didn't realize that I was actually more upset by it. And that's kind of why I walked out thinking I didn't like it. But in terms of I watch movies because I want them to affect me. And to rate it on that scale, I think it was very effective.
I agree.
And so my complaints in terms of the editing, yes, there were long monologues and I did feel like things could have been moved along more quickly. Mm-hmm. But now that I think about it, the pacing seems very intentional, and some of I do think there were ADR lines added because there might have been fear from producers that people wouldn't understand things. But it's kind of one of those movies that, like I said, it's kind of like a David Lynch, almost like Mulholland Drive. Not as it was actually pretty straightforward in a lot of ways, but in terms of the themes that they wanted to approach, you really do have to kind of ponder and think of what the filmmaker was getting at.
It does remind me of Mulholland Drive in that sense. Suddenly the story is different, and it's they're telling you this story of what happened for real, and it's very weird and odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was once, when I was in grad school, I forget who it was, but some screenwriter came and talked to us, and they said that the entire point of a film is to give the audience an emotional experience, and if they don't feel anything, you haven't done your job. And so I agree with that. I think we do turn to entertainment to feel things, which in this movie was both a good thing and a bad thing because maybe the character, both of them, couldn't live their life. They were just kind of caught up in fantasy.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll definitely be thinking about it. for a while. Felt like a dream.
It did really feel like a dream, which reminds me of David Lynch. It's just that Lynchian dream state.
That Lynchian vibe. But the thing I love about David Lynch is like, if you ask him what something's about, he's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I like that too.
I like that. It's like, all right.
Sometimes it scares me because it kind of feels almost like reckless in a way. It's like, do you like when you're making this, like, do you know what like your intention is? Like, what do you want people to get out of it? And I think he's more about like whether he's being honest about that or not.
Yeah.
I think he just like wants you to experience a journey, and he's kind of curious on how people react to things. I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Queer Cinema Catchup is on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify. Acast is where it's hosted. Please, if you have a chance, rate us, give us a review. We'd really
Subscribe.
appreciate it. We're also on Instagram at queer_cinema_catchup. And then we also have an email, queercinemacatchup@gmail.com. Please write in.
And a TikTok.
Any comments. We also have TikTok. And again, like the emails, we'd be really excited. People who have seen this movie, please share your thoughts.
Yeah. And I think last week I asked for a first email, and we did get one from my sister.
Caroline.
Which is really sweet.
What'd she say?
I can read it. Hello. Great job so far. Love the dynamic between you guys. Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Caroline.
Yeah, but this is like, just something we're going to be doing. I mean, I just feel like we're just generally like, this is like our real life where we just watch things, then we talk about it, and now we're just recording ourselves doing that. So I'm excited to continue.
Coming to you live from our couch in our family room,
Yes.
where we often discuss. So we're happy you're here. Please continue listening. I'm Joe.
And I'm Allison.
And this has been Queer Cinema Catchup.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.